are an outspoken Arab man who unapologetically advocates for resistance against the apartheid and now genocidal regime. But I'd like to hone in on some of the things you've said, which have really gotten their tempers fired up. And so, and I'm sure there have been a number of things over the years, because you mentioned that you used language that's demeaning of Zionists.
Yeah.
And why don't you tell me, in your opinion, based on what you've seen and heard in terms of the reactions, what do you think are the three most controversial things you've had to say about Zionists?
Well, obviously, I targeted the Grand Wizard of Zionism in Canada, Erwin Cutler.
Right.
And we have an ongoing, I guess, battle, me and him, all the way back to 2002 with the shutdown of Netanyahu at Concordia University. At the time, Erwin Cutler was the Minister of Justice in Canada. And of course, some would say the Minister of Injustice. And we had, given that the War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity Act is the only person that can charge somebody under that is the Minister of Justice, or the Attorney General, Erwin Cutler. At the time, we had petitioned Erwin Cutler to arrest Netanyahu, and he refused. So we ended up occupying his office, his writing office in Montreal. So he never forgot that, obviously.
I just want to pause there for the benefit of our audience and say that in 2002, and I say this as a lawyer, there was absolutely no question that Netanyahu was a war criminal, because Netanyahu, in his capacity as Israeli leader, minister, prime minister, had done everything he could to expand the settlements in the West Bank. And I'm not even going to get into all the atrocities for which he is directly and indirectly responsible and was at that time. Let's just talk about the settlements so people understand how outrageous it was that Cutler refused to lift a finger to arrest Netanyahu when he was in the jurisdiction of the Canadian government. The settlements are an unequivocal war crime, slam dunk war crime. The forcible transfer of a civilian population to occupied territory is a clear violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention. And in fact, 2004, 2 years later, the International Court of Justice unanimously ruled, even the American judge, that the settlements violate international law. So I just want to say, there's really no plausible justification, if we're going to take seriously the war crimes legislation, the Geneva Convention Act being incorporated into Canadian law, for the Attorney General of Canada not to arrest Netanyahu when he is on Canadian territory.
Yes.
So please continue.
Yes, and maybe some of our viewers wouldn't know this, but Erwin Cutler, his wife, was the personal secretary of Menachem Begin, the Israeli Prime Minister. And their daughter,
who, by the way, was involved in I believe, the Haganah terrorist organization back in the day.
Yes, and so he's a war criminal, butcher, and she was his personal secretary. And the daughter or stepdaughter that took Erwin Cutler's name, the daughter of his wife, it was a Knesset member, a member of the Knesset with the Likud party. Mm-hmm. So clearly the family of Erwin Cutler are even on the extreme right of the fascist in the Zionist colony. So it's not like Erwin Cutler, how they portray him in the Canadian media as a liberal.
So what's the most controversial thing you said about the Grand Wizard of Zionism in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I said he looks like a circumcised dick with makeup, so right. For them, that was a personal humiliation. And of course, all his Zionist dogs came barking
And when was this that you called him?
This was in 2022.
Uh-huh.
And look, but I want to kind of be clear, the reason that the Canadian government attacked me lately.
I want to come back to that. Let's just focus on this for a second. Would you agree with me, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here, that you can criticize, and I would apply the same commentary to myself, because I've said some things in retrospect, I believe they were absolutely true, they were entirely justified, but in retrospect, if I had found language that was more, shall we say, civilized, it would have probably been better.
Yes.
What do you say
listen,
about
I
that?
didn't use the word dick, by the way.
Ah.
I used the word penis.
Okay. Well,
so I used
that's an
the,
improvement. So,
you know, the scientific term. I
Right.
also said that Jewish white supremacists are bags of human feces.
Right.
Again, I didn't use slang. I used the scientific
Right.
term for things.
now, I want to pause there. People may not know this, but when B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization, came out with its report on Israeli apartheid, it used that phrase repeatedly, Jewish white supremacy.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Sorry, so go ahead.
So definitely it is nothing that I say is illegal to say. Nothing that I said is criminal. Nothing that I said could fall under hate speech laws. This is why I have never been charged with such thing. But what the Zionists do in their control of media in Canada, and when I say Zionists control the media in Canada, I don't mean Jews control the media in Canada. For the Rogers family is a Anglo-Protestant family that controls 80-somewhat% of the licensed broadcasters in English, but it is a Zionist family. Similarly, in the French sectors in Canada, the broadcasters is the Palaiseau family, which is a French Catholic family that is Zionist.
And fanatically so. I think.
Exactly, and they own the majority of the French-speaking media in Quebec and Canada.
Right.
Therefore, the Zionists control the media in Canada, and what they do, knowing that they can't find me guilty of any crime and they can't charge me with hate speech or what have you, they decide to assassinate my name. So it's a political assassination, a destruction of a reputation, of repetitive libelous and defamatory comments about myself without allowing me to appear on this media. I have not been allowed one right to response on any media outlet in Canada.
And let me say, I am a passionate believer, having been on the receiving end of many of these attacks myself, in the right to defend oneself, particularly against an accusation so severe as anti-Semitism. But I have not found myself in the position. I've always maintained some kind of a presence. I don't know how I've managed to do it. Maybe I've just been lucky so that I was able to respond. But they've completely silenced you, and one of the reasons why I wanted to have this discussion with you today is I want people to understand, who are watching and listening, is that I've never seen, even in the independent media, not just in the mainstream media, your response to any of these very serious accusations. And I just find that whatever people may think about the language that you've used, whatever they may think about your critique of Israel and Zionism, to say that you shouldn't even have an opportunity to respond to these allegations is outrageous to me.
The only media that gave me space are indigenous media in Canada. And so I was on the Real People's media. We had a panel with indigenous leaders, including the war chief of the Mohawk Nation, and black leaders. And we spoke about these things. So ultimately, what we see is that because they cannot argue, the Zionists cannot argue with me, they will lose any argument. They prefer to not have any argument and just take all the space for themselves to defame their opponents.
So you've mentioned two things. There's the rather unfortunate human feces comment, and then there was the human penis comment. I mean, I can't, even though I myself don't recommend people to use that language, I find it difficult not to be amused by it, only because the people we're talking about, and this is something I think it's very important to say, is that guys like you and I, we always punch up.
Yeah.
We're talking about people who are very powerful, right? Very influential people. We don't spend our time crushing people, even if we disagree with them, who really aren't having an impact on public policy.
Yeah.
So, bringing people down a notch, these power mongers who are using their power in such a depraved way, with language which is admittedly disrespectful.
Yes, and there's this insistence that the Zionists have on respectability. I don't have to respect Hitler. I don't have to respect Pol Pot. We don't have to respect criminals. Therefore, this insistence that we only speak about Zionists in respectable language is actually counter to a revolutionary liberationist. We're supposed to be able to humiliate, make fun of these monsters, because the only other thing we can do if we don't joke about them is to take arms against them. How is somebody...
And then we'll end up dead.
Exactly, and
Right.
we'll end up being called terrorists.
Right.
So the only possible thing that a Palestinian, an Arab, a Muslim, Canadian can do to face off with these powerful Zionists is to humiliate them, make fun of them. This is supposed to be the safest thing that you can do. Comedically joke about your opponent. Apparently, that is not allowed for Palestinians. We're not allowed. We have to be respectful when we speak to our genociders.
Now, there have been some rather extraordinary attempts made in the recent past to really completely marginalize you and remove you from any corner of the public discourse, however remote that corner may be. And one of them involved, you have an organization which was doing advocacy work at the CRTC around diversity. Could you tell us briefly about that organization and what happened to it?
Yes, it's the Community Media Advocacy Center, and our main work was focused on the rights of indigenous, racialized, and disability communities to media reflection and employment. We had consulted the Mexican government, for instance, to write its indigenous broadcasting laws, the South African government to write its community television laws. And what the Zionists, what really pissed off the Zionists in Canada is that CMAC became the authority at the CRTC on these files. And what blew their mind was our last participation at the CRTC during the hearing to renew the license of the CBC. And during that hearing, we demanded that the CRTC order CBC to put on the file the employment diversity numbers, their programming diversity numbers, and the CRTC ordered CBC to do so, and the CBC refused the order of the CRTC to release this information on the record, and we ended up having people inside CBC leak us this information, and we deposited on the record, and we had a huge battle with the president of the CBC on the issue of the ban of the use of the word Palestine, okay? And that came out, all of it during the hearing, which really angered the Zionists, that it became an issue. And at the end of this hearing, the CRTC actually, for the first time in its 60 years history, ordered and put conditions of license on CBC to come into compliance with the law for the number of employees that are racialized or indigenous, and for the programming. And you know what happened? The government of Canada revoked the decision of the CRTC. The attack came on me and on CMAC, and part of it was, behind it really was this issue. It's not the issue of my language.
Right. Just so people understand, if am I correct that the pretext for this assault on the decision in your work was a human feces comment? Was that
basically what the Zionists wanted to do is to kind of ruin the name of CMAC, okay, the Community Media Advocacy Center, and the only thing that they could do, or our advocacy at the CRTC, is by targeting my Twitter account, my personal Twitter account, and the views that I put there, or the language that I use. And while this attack was happening on CMAC and myself, because of the language that I use, behind the scene, without anybody noticing, the governor in council, meaning the cabinet of the prime minister, revoked the decision with the CRTC, and nobody covered it. So nobody covered the fact that the government of Canada revoked the CRTC decision because it gave the rights to racialized and indigenous people finally to have employment at the CBC.
And they have since come after your organization. First of all, am I correct that they've disqualified CMAC from making any further submissions to the CRTC effectively?
Well, we had a contract with the Ministry of Heritage to
CMAC did.
Yes, CMAC had a contract with the Ministry of Heritage to organize national and regional conferences that bring together the racialized communities, producers from those communities, and academics from those communities, to put a proposal forward to the CRTC about new regulation to guarantee the rights of these communities. And halfway through this work was when the attack came on myself, and the Ministry of Heritage revoked the contract that it had with CMAC. The chair of the CRTC was brought in front of the Heritage Committee at the Parliament and was asked to ban myself and CMAC from participating. And he said a few things that are very telling. One of them being that, well, the CRTC is an open forum, anyone can intervene, and that we can't ban those who are our critics. CMAC was the major critic for the CRTC on the files of racialized, indigenous, and disability communities, and so he admitted that we are the major critic, but he said they were studying ways to not allow us to intervene, which would be not only a breach of CRTC policies and regulations, but it would be a breach of the norms of court procedures. Why? Because if I go in front of a court and I put a file, let's take Rudy Giuliani, who everybody hates. Okay, so Rudy Giuliani goes into court and he puts in front of the judge motions or files on this court case. Imagine if the judge says to him, I will not accept your presence in my court. I will not accept your interventions on this file because I don't like your speech outside my court. So basically the CRTC and the Canadian government are trying to ban CMAC from participating at the CRTC, not because of our filings at the CRTC, but because of speech outside this court.
Right.
And that is a breach of the norms of justice, period, or procedures of court.
Am I correct that CMAC is a not-for-profit corporation?
Yes, it's a non-for-profit corporation, and I'm just a consultant there. I
Right.
don't even sit on the board of directors.
So it actually has, so people understand, it has distinct legal personality, so they're punishing the not-for-profit corporation that's done all of this important work at the CRTC.
Yes, and the board of directors of CMAC is all indigenous women. Okay, so I am the only non-indigenous person in the organization, representing on the files of racialized communities, as my expertise is. So it's really odd what they were trying to do, and it's of course it's throwing away hundreds of years of norms of legal proceedings.
Now, they're trying to claw back some money from CMAC, I understand. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So that contract from the Canadian Heritage, was $140,000, and under pressure from the Zionists, the minister and the Attorney General wanted to recover this money, and of course, anyone that knows any basics about contract law. The way it works is you go into a restaurant, you order 10 plates, and 5 of them arrive at the table. You can tell the waiter stop the other 5, but you have to pay for the 5 that are on your table, whether you ate them or not, whether you like the food or not. The service has been provided. So in this situation, we had offered to return the money that wasn't spent because we were halfway through the proceedings of the conferences and so on. We've done three out of the 6 conferences, and the Ministry of Heritage and the Canadian government were refusing. They're demanding all of the money back. So
I want to be clear about something. So the submissions that you made up until that point in time were that CMAC, not you, but CMAC, and perhaps you were formulating them, advocating whatever because of your position within CMAC, but they were formally the submissions of CMAC for which CMAC was paid. They're not claiming that there was anything false or anything that amounted to hate speech in those submissions. What they're saying is somebody who's closely associated with CMAC said things outside of that context, outside of submissions to the CRTC, and so they want money back for perfectly useful work that the CMAC did for the CRTC. Have I got that right?
Yes. Again, there's nothing, like there was a report to the Canadian Heritage halfway through the proceedings of these conferences. We got the full, full grade, perfect passing colors, and there was nothing in those conferences that they were pointing out to say that they don't like about it. So
if I could just use that metaphor, so you go to the restaurant, those 5 dishes you ate, they were perfectly good dishes.
Yes.
But the waiter said something really nasty outside the restaurant. In your opinion, it's really nasty.
Yes.
So now you demand
in another life.
Correct.
Yes, in another country, not even inside the restaurant.
Right. So now you demand to have the food for free. You don't have to pay anything for the food.
Yes. Which is anyone who's a beginner lawyer in contract law would tell you that's a losing argument in court. And in fact, usually, if you do something like this in front of a judge, the judge will get really angry because this is the basics of contract law, and will demand damages to the person that you're trying to sue. So the Canadian government, in order to appease these Zionists, were willing to go in front of a judge in the name of the Attorney General of Canada and lose badly and have to pay us damages, okay, all to appease the Zionists. And all they want to do, by the way, it's been now almost 2 years since this debacle started, and they keep on delaying with the court proceedings because they know they're going to lose. And but I predict, like, if we do go to court, which I don't think we're going to go to court. I think somebody's going to close the file very soon as the pressure from the Zionists lifts. But if we do go to court and we win, which we will win 100%, they will appeal it to the appeals court, and they will appeal it to the Supreme Court.
Causing CMAC to incur legal expenses.
Exactly, and all to appease the Zionists, not because there's any legality or there's any hope of them winning, and they'll drag it on for 10 years, all the way to the Supreme Court, and get humiliated. By that time, Trudeau and all his minions will have been out of politics and forgotten, and all the money that they would have wasted for the Canadian government and the Canadian public would count on somebody else's back.
Normally I'd say they would be forgotten, but given their complicity in this genocide, I have a feeling they're not going to be forgotten anytime soon.
Oh, yes.
Now, the last thing I want to talk to you about is really quite extraordinary. Maybe we take a chat over here or take a walk over here and let our audience see what other beautiful wonders we're surrounded by. There was an extraordinary. Do you want to tell us something about that before I ask you my question?
Oh, we're going to go into the shrine itself.
Do we need to take our shoes off for the shrine?
We can probably. Okay. Yeah. We have to take off our shoes here.
Just do that. And so, perhaps before I ask you my last question, you could just take a quick tour of this wonderful shrine. Wow. So is that where the little girl was supposedly buried,
Yes.
according to tradition?
Yes, so this is her grave site,
Right,
and people go close to it and pray to her.
right. What was her name?
Khawla.
And this shrine has existed for how long?
It has existed for almost 300 years now, and obviously it's been renovated.
So the Iranian government funded the renovation of the interior as well? Not
Yes.
just the exterior?
Yeah.
Now, actually, I thought there's one other question I should have asked you at the beginning. Would you call yourself a religious man? And if so, what religion do you ascribe to?
I would say I'm faithful. So I have faith that there is one God and one humanity, and that our duty on this earth as human beings is to do justice, to do the 10 commandments, basically. Don't kill, don't steal, don't. And the best form of worship is to help others and liberate ourselves and anyone that is facing oppression. That is, I think, if there is a God, that this is the thing that they would ask us the most. And the story of Khawla that we're visiting today, or the story of Ali and Hussein, or the story of Jesus, or all these prophets before them, it is always the story of suffering in order to bring justice to the community we live in. And if so it doesn't matter to me what is your what sources of traditions you can pull on that you have in your culture, in your as long as you can find in those sources something that encourages you to give to the community and better the society around you and sacrifice yourself to that, then you are on the right path of the one God and the one humanity.
So perhaps take my last question outside, because I don't want to disturb the worshippers. But I'll start my question here, and you can answer when we get out the door. There was an extraordinary, in my opinion, it was extraordinary hearing in Washington, I believe, recently, which had a lot to do with you. So could you maybe tell us, what was that all about?
Yeah, I mean, the Zionists really lost their mind. And I guess my humiliation of Erwin Cutler and my disregard to civility when speaking about Zionists, triggered them to have such an extraordinary hearing. I don't. Oh, sorry.
We have to go out this way. Okay, sorry. We'll take it outside.
We almost went to the women's section.
Okay. So again, we were. Thank you.
Yeah, so the Zionists. Yeah, they convened a congressional hearing that brought together Canadian parliamentarians, Israeli Knesset members, British parliamentarians, and white South African parliamentarians. And they rounded the heads of the social media sites, Meta, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. And in this hearing, they brought out all my tweets and my posts, and asked openly these media outlets to close two accounts. That of the Ayatollah Khamenei, the head of the Iranian state, and myself, Laith Marouf. I mean, when I saw that, I cracked up. Obviously it's a huge honor to be put on the same level of a leader of a 90 million people nation with nuclear power, but it also shows you the ridiculousness and the fragility of the Zionists, that they have to go after Laith Marouf with 20,000 followers on Twitter because they got hurt in their feelings, that they lose their minds. And this is what, in general, you could see how Zionists deal with Palestine liberation. Currently, they've already lost their minds. Mm-hmm. They cannot come up with clear arguments, and the only reason that they are able to do what they did to me is because of their undue influence that they have. Otherwise, any logical person, if a head of TikTok or Facebook or whatever would have looked at my account, would be like, that's not even worth the trouble. It doesn't have that many followers. Why would they target? Why would the Congress be interested in this?
Right. And just to close the loop on this quite extraordinary episode, I mean, do they got nothing better to do with their time? I mean, the United States is falling apart, for God's sakes. There's a genocide. There's an existentially dangerous war being fought in Ukraine. There's millions upon millions of Americans living in the streets, and they took their precious time to pressure the heads of social media to remove you, who had a maximum of 20,000 followers on Twitter, permanently from the social media platform. It's quite extraordinary. But I just want to highlight that I believe one of the people who participated in this fiasco, this circus, who led the charge was Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who I believe was the former chairperson of the Democratic National Committee and who helped cheat Bernie Sanders out of the Democratic nomination in 2016 by feeding Hillary Clinton the questions for the debates with Bernie Sanders. I think I've got that right.
Yes, she was the chair of these hearings, these proceedings at the Congress, which again, I was like, wow, they have to bring the head of the Democratic Party to punish Laith Marouf. I mean, whoa, to round up all these parliamentarians from the world. I'm like, wow, I joke about it, but truly, my account was effective, even if it didn't have this much reach. Effective in empowering other Arab and Palestinian people in the diaspora because of my uncompromising language, my strong positionality in support of liberation, the fact that it's 30 years of the Zionists trying to destroy me so many times, and I keep on popping back up, never bowing down, never softening my language or my positionality, and I have become this global authority on broadcast law and those files. These are all things that anger them,
So they're playing basically, instead of whack-a-mole, whack-a-lathe.
Yeah.
So I just want to say to our audience, although you've been completely disappeared from the public discourse in Canada, you are making regular appearances on the Garland Nixon show.
Yes.
I happen to be a huge fan of Garland Nixon because he brings a kind of a street-wise knowledge and experience and wisdom to complex geopolitical questions, and he's also extraordinarily funny. And you've been coming on that show now and providing, I think, extraordinarily insightful and informative analysis about the geopolitics of this region. So I recommend that people watch your appearances. How often are you appearing? Once a week?
Once a week, yes.
Once a week on the Garland Nixon Show.
Yeah,
And should
on
also
Tuesdays
watch
usually.
Right, and you should also watch Garland's other commentary because, you know, really, as I said, he's providing a perspective that is badly needed, as are you,
Yes.
in the public discourse.
I love him, Garland. He's a great man. He's a great man.
So thanks very much for speaking with us
All
today.
right.